My mom told everyone I died. My stepfather stole $300,000, and my grandparents raised me. But I came back, and then I've been holding this in for 14 years. 14 years of waiting, building, and learning how to stand on my own feet after my mother tore my life apart like it was nothing. I never thought I'd get this far, but here I am. And now my second phone won't stop lighting up with frantic messages from the same woman who dumped me like garbage. Let me take you back to where it started. I was 9 years old. My dad, my best friend, my hero, died of stomach cancer after fighting it for most of a year. I still remember how he looked the day he passed. He was thinner than ever, barely able to talk, but he squeezed my hand and smiled. That was the last time I saw him alive. My mom didn't wait long. Maybe 3 weeks later, she was already dressing up for dinner dates with a guy from her office. His name was Dean. He was a developer, no kids of his own, and he drove this shiny black car that he liked to show off. Dean wasn't mean at first. He just didn't care that I existed. He only cared about my mom. And pretty soon, she only cared about him. That winter, she started throwing out my dad's things. Just tossing his old books, his tools, even his records. Said we needed to move forward. But I kept a few things hidden in my closet. One of them was a watch, an old Hamilton my dad got from his dad. He'd left it for me in his will. Nothing fancy, but it was his. And it mattered. So I started wearing it all the time. When I cried at night, my mom would roll her eyes or tell me I was doing it for attention. One night, Dean even told her I was trying to manipulate her by being sad. I was 10, just a scared kid missing my dad. But she believed him. The day everything changed, she told me we were going on a trip. She dropped me off at my grandmother's place, her mother, saying she and Dean were getting married the next day and that I'd stay there while they went on a quick honeymoon. I didn't even pack anything myself. She did it all. But that night, my grandma got real sick. Ambulance and everything. And instead of changing her plans or waiting a day, my mom stormed in, yanked me out of bed, and dragged me into Dean's car. I was still in pajamas when we pulled up to the courthouse. It was early morning, still dark. I sat on a bench while they signed papers and took pictures. No family, no friends. Just them. Then we drove straight to the train station. They said they were heading to New Orleans, some romantic getaway. I was tired, hungry, and completely confused. My mom wore a white pantsuit, her hair all done up. She didn't look like the same person who used to make pancakes with me on Saturdays. About 20 minutes into the train ride, she snapped. I don't know what set her off. Maybe I yawned. Maybe I looked sad. Whatever it was, she grabbed me by the collar and started dragging me through the train. I mean, literally pulling me down the aisle, through 3 different cars. People were watching, whispering. Nobody said a word. She stopped when she saw this older couple sitting near the back of a coach car. She pointed at them and said, "You take him." I can't look at his face another second. The old man stood up, confused. His wife just stared at me, her mouth open. My mom tossed my backpack onto their table and said everything I'd need was in there. Then she turned and walked away like she'd just dropped off a stray dog. I was sobbing. I tried to go after her, but the old man stepped between us, gently holding me back. Dean caught up to her near the exit. He turned around, grabbed my chin so hard it left a bruise, and told me, "Your mommy chose me. Don't forget that while you cry yourself to sleep." My watch was on my wrist. I always wore it. When my mom saw it, she got this angry look and ripped it off. The band snapped. She hissed that I didn't deserve anything that reminded her of my father. The train had made a short stop and was about to move again. Before she and Dean stepped off, she turned around, pointed at me through the window, and said, "If you ever try to find me, I'll tell everyone you died." Then the doors closed. That was it. I collapsed in that old lady's arms. They turned out to be the kindest people I could have hoped for. They called the police, who tracked down my dad's parents. They came to pick me up, crying the whole time. Said they'd been trying to see me for months, but my mom wouldn't let them. They filed for custody immediately. My mother never showed up to the hearing. Not a letter. Not a call. Nothing. A few days later, she and Dean moved to Arizona. Just gone. But I wasn't gone. Not by a long shot. After the court gave my grandparents full custody, life didn't exactly get easier, but it got safer. My grandfather, Everett, was a retired accountant with a sharp sense of right and wrong. My grandmother, Nora, was soft-spoken but firm. They let me cry when I needed to. They answered every question I had about my dad, even the hard ones. They didn't try to fix me. They just let me be. For the next few years, I focused on being a regular kid, or at least I tried to. But some things never left my head. My mom's voice telling me she'd pretend I was dead. Dean's hand bruising my chin. The way nobody on that train stopped her. I'd replay it at night, over and over, until sleep finally took me. Then, When I turned 16, something happened that hardened everything inside me. One of my mother's old friends, someone who hadn't seen her in years, called my grandmother out of the blue. She just run into Lillian at a benefit dinner in Phoenix. My mom told her I died. Not just that, I died of the same cancer that took my dad. She was crying about it, milking it for sympathy. Told stories about how brave I was, how hard it was to lose me. I was standing in the kitchen when my grandma hung up. Her hands were shaking. When she told me, I just stood there. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. Something broke, but it didn't make noise. It just sank deeper into my chest. That's the moment I decided. I wasn't going to be erased. I wasn't going to be the sad story she used to boost her image. One day, somehow, she'd have to look me in the eye and know I didn't disappear. At first, I just wanted to know where she was. I didn't care about revenge. Not yet. I just needed to see how far gone she was. So I searched for her online. She kept her maiden name tucked into her social media handles, so it wasn't hard to track her down. And when I found her, I realized something. She wasn't hiding. She and Dean lived in this pristine, gated suburb outside of Scottsdale. Their profiles were full of champagne brunches, resort vacations, and glitzy charity events. She had this public persona, grieving widow turned philanthropic wife. Every caption was about how blessed she was to have found love again. Not a single mention of my dad. Not one photo. I didn't exist. I was a ghost. And then I found it. A local lifestyle magazine had done a spotlight on their home and their involvement in children's charities. There was a quote from her, Lillian, about how tragically she and Dean had never been able to have children of their own. That's why, she claimed, they were so devoted to giving back to the youth of tomorrow. I saw red. I threw my phone. I didn't care that it cracked. She used my death like it was branding. She built a whole personality around being childless when she wasn't. She abandoned me and then made herself the victim of the lie she created. That's when it shifted. Curiosity turned to something colder. Not rage, something sharper. I started documenting, saving posts, tracking their contacts. I set up alerts for both their names. I followed their friends from burner accounts. I wanted to understand everything. Where they went, who they talked to, what mattered to them. That same year, my grandfather sat me down. He'd been watching me. I think he knew. He didn't tell me to stop. He said, "Son, the best revenge isn't hurting someone. It's making yourself untouchable." Then, when they look up from the mess they made, they realize they don't even get a seat at your table. I never forgot that. He passed the following summer. Before he died, he left me a letter. Inside was some money he'd saved just for me and a note that said, "Make something of this. And don't let her steal one more thing from your story." I used that money to take business classes online. I got certified in finance and coding. Graduated high school a year early. I didn't go straight to college. I moved to California instead to live with a cousin and take night courses. I needed to be near the kind of industries Dean was involved in: real estate, investment, property development. By the time I turned 20, I'd built up a solid portfolio and started working with a small consulting firm. I used my legal name, my dad's name, not the name my mother dropped me with. Nobody there connected me to them. Nobody had to. I kept everything professional, clean, focused. Then, during a meeting, I heard Dean's name come up. A new partner said he was looking for fresh opportunities and possibly expanding into mixed-use builds. I stayed quiet, but inside, something clicked. The door was opening. I reached out later, using my company's email, and pitched a concept, not a scam, not a trap, just a complicated opportunity that required a lot of upfront capital. A prestige-heavy deal, all legal, but designed to strain someone who was already playing above his financial weight class. Dean took the bait. Slowly, carefully, I earned trust with his network. Nothing fast, nothing flashy. I became the guy who delivered exactly what he needed, but always just enough to keep him reaching. I worked that angle for over a year. Along the way, I found out even more about the facade. Dean had been faking stability for a while, over-leveraged, backed by fragile partnerships, selling image harder than product. It wasn't illegal, but it was brittle. And Lillian? She was just as bad. She built a bubble of influence based on lies. That she'd been a struggling single woman who clawed her way back from grief. That Dean had saved her. That she spent her days helping orphan kids because she knew what loss felt like. Meanwhile, she'd erased the man who actually loved her and the child they had together. 6 months ago, I knew I was ready. I created a separate entity, one legally clean and arm's length from me, and packaged the deal Dean had been waiting for. An upscale, high-status investment with a premium return, but only if you moved fast. Dean jumped. He dumped capital into it, brought in new investors, made promises he couldn't back up. And while he was doing that, I was building a separate dossier. Every fake post, every quote about her dead son, every email where she tried to rewrite history. And I had something else, something I'd been holding on to. 2 years ago, I found my dad's watch in an online auction. My mother had sold it. I bought it back, anonymously, and paid more than it was worth just to own it again. I had it restored. I wore it every day while I built this plan. Now, with Dean locked into my investment and Lillian preparing to host some giant charity gala for one of their foundations, the final phase was set. And I was going to walk into their house like I belonged there. They wouldn't know who I was. Not yet. The night of the gala felt unreal. I sat in my car 2 blocks from their house, palms sweating, stomach twisted into something ugly. 14 years had brought me here, and for a moment, I considered turning around. Just vanishing again. But I didn't. I reached into my jacket, pressed my fingers against the face of my father's watch, and reminded myself why I came. Their house sat on a quiet hill in the outskirts of Scottsdale. It was white stone and glass, with uplighting that made it glow like a luxury showroom. 2 valets stood at the front, directing arriving cars into a circle drive. I watched as women stepped out in shimmering dresses and men adjusted cufflinks before walking through the arched front doors. I checked my invitation again. It was real, pulled from the email chain of Dean's investment partner, the same man who unknowingly opened the door for me months ago. I fixed my jacket, adjusted my tie, and stepped out. Inside, everything was curated to perfection. There were flowers flown in from Colombia, champagne that probably cost more than my first car, and a string quartet in the corner playing something slow and elegant. Staff moved like shadows, balancing trays of appetizers and flutes of wine. The walls were lined with soft-lit photographs from their so-called charitable endeavors. Kids in hospital gowns, ribbon cuttings, gala awards. All branding. I walked slowly, soaking in the world they'd built on top of my bones. I saw Dean first. He looked older but still sharp, in a navy suit and custom shoes. His hair was grayer, but the smug confidence hadn't aged a day. He was holding court with a group of men in tailored jackets, telling a story that had everyone laughing just a little too hard. I recognized the tone. It was the same one he used to tell my mom I was acting out for attention. I kept my distance, listening for a while, nodding to people who looked my way. No one questioned me. I belonged here, or at least I looked like I did. Then I saw her. Lillian. She was across the room, holding a glass of white wine and surrounded by women in silver and black gowns. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her smile forced, polished, the way someone smiles when they've been practicing it for cameras. She looked thinner, colder, but I still recognized the sharp line of her jaw, the same one I saw in the mirror every morning. I watched her for a while, waiting for the right moment. But first, I had a meeting to finish. I walked back toward Dean's group and caught the tail end of a conversation about his latest investment, the one I'd baited him into. I stepped in naturally, made a comment about risk mitigation and sector overlap. His eyes landed on me, curious but open. We talked for 15 minutes. He didn't recognize me, not even a flicker. He saw me as a rising consultant, just another piece in his money game. I asked a few pointed questions, steering the conversation so he'd confirm what I already knew, that he was heavily leveraged, had pulled in 3 new investors, and needed results fast. He bragged like he always had. Once I had what I needed, I excused myself, took a breath, walked toward my mother. She was in mid-conversation, laughing at something, her hand resting gently on another woman's arm. I waited, then stepped in. "Excuse me," I said, smiling. "Would you mind if I joined you for a moment?" The women looked me over, polite but cautious. I introduced myself, first name, middle, and my father's last name. The full version. The one she knew when I was a boy. She didn't flinch. Not at first, but something in her eyes shifted. She tilted her head like she'd heard a name she couldn't quite place. I chatted casually, told them I'd just spoken with Dean, that we'd been discussing the new investment his firm had jumped into, said I'd been watching it carefully and was excited to see what came of it. Then I pulled out my phone and showed them an old photo, me and my dad, standing outside a baseball stadium. He had his arm around my shoulder. I was 8, missing a tooth. "Sorry," I said, "just been thinking about my dad lately. People say we looked alike." One of the women smiled and agreed, then passed the phone to Lillian. She looked down at it and froze. The glass in her hand tipped slightly. Her fingers tightened. She looked up at me, and I saw it, the recognition crashing over her like a wave. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You okay?" I asked softly. "You look like you've seen a ghost." The other women looked confused. One asked if she needed to sit down. Lillian barely nodded, eyes locked on mine. I suggested we talk privately. She didn't argue. She followed me through a side hallway, and into the den. I shut the door behind us. No one else around. I pulled the watch from my jacket. She saw it immediately. Her eyes darted to it like it burned. This looked familiar? I asked. You tore it off my wrist on a train platform in 1999. Said I didn't deserve anything that reminded you of him. She said nothing. You remember what Dean said to me? When he bruised my chin and told me you chose him over me. Still silence. I was wearing this watch that day. My dad left it to me in his will. You tried to sell it. Her voice cracked. What do you want? Nothing from you, I said. Just thought you might want to know who Dean's new partner really is. I smiled. I created the investment. I built it from scratch. Every condition, every clause, every demand, it's mine. And he poured everything into it. He's tied up so tight he can't breathe. She blinked. You're lying. Check the company registry, I said. You won't find my name directly. But if you know where to look, it's there. Everything's legal. Every dollar accounted for. She tried to keep control. Tried to tell me I didn't understand what she'd gone through after my dad died. That Dean pressured her. That she was scared. Young. No, I said. You weren't scared. You were selfish. You could have chosen me. But you didn't. You left me with strangers on a train. Then I handed her a card. Check your email when you get home. You'll find documents, copies of your social posts, investment terms, proof of your lies. Forward it to Dean. She stared at the card like it had teeth. After you read it, call me. That's a direct line. Not my real one. Just for you. Then I opened the door. She followed me halfway to the hall, still stunned. I turned, smiled one last time, and said, Tell Dean thank you for the lovely party. And just like that, I left. My watch ticking slowly, steady, just like I planned. By the time I got home that night, my second phone had already started buzzing. A text from an unknown number. Then another. Then a call. I turned the phone face down and poured myself a drink. Let them sweat. I didn't sleep. Not because I was anxious, because I wasn't. I was finally still. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without carrying weight on my chest. When the sun came up, I turned the phone over and started reading. The first few messages were what I expected. My mother calling me delusional, telling me I was sick, that I had no idea the damage I'd just done. Dean's name popped up next. He didn't bother with small talk. Just threats. Legal action, defamation, breach of contract, terms he thought would scare me. They didn't. Then the tone shifted. Around midnight, the messages changed. They'd read the emails. They'd followed the breadcrumbs I left. They understood what was happening. Dean's tone went from threatening to frantic. He offered to meet, offered to buy me out, asked what I wanted. My mother, on the other hand, took a different route. She started begging. Voice messages filled with fake sobs and strained apologies. She told me I didn't understand what it was like to be a widow, how hard it had been, how Dean helped her survive, that she always regretted what happened on the train. I listened to one message 3 times just to be sure I heard her right. She said, You have no idea what it was like to raise a child that reminded me so much of a man who left me with nothing. That was the line. My father left her the house, the car, the insurance, and savings. She had more than most people. And she still chose to leave me behind like baggage she didn't want to carry. Around noon, I finally picked up. I put the call on speaker, hit record on my laptop, completely legal in my state, and waited. She answered on the first ring. Her voice, sickeningly sweet. Sweetie. I'm so glad you called. I cut her off. Put Dean on the line. There was a pause. Muffled sounds. Then his voice. What do you want? He snapped. I told them plainly. I had no interest in dragging this out. I didn't want their money. I wanted clarity. And consequences. First, I said, Lillian would send a public statement to every person in her social circle. Every donor, every friend, every club, admitting everything. The abandonment. The lie about me dying. The lies about my father. All of it. Second, I wanted every remaining item of my father's in her possession. Photos. Letters. That ring he wore through college. Anything she hadn't sold or destroyed. And third, I wanted a donation. A real one. Not a check written for show. I told them to wire $300,000 to the Hospice Care Foundation that had taken care of my dad during his final days. No tax write-off. No media coverage. Dean tried to talk his way out of it. Suggested a private deal. Said they'd handle things internally. I laughed. Then I hung up. 10 minutes later. The phone rang again. I ignored it. Then I texted them a screenshot, a drafted email, addressed to over 100 people, ready to send. Attached were receipts, photos, statements from the old couple who took me in on that train. Even a scan of the police report my grandparents filed the day I was left behind. 2 hours later, Dean called back. This time, he didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He agreed. 24 hours later, the email hit inboxes across Arizona. I watched it happen in real time. Her social media presence fell apart. Followers dropped by the dozens. Comments rolled in shock, horror, disgust. Her name was mentioned in threads I wasn't even following. And Dean? His investors started pulling out. Quietly, but fast. Phone calls weren't returned. Meetings were canceled. I got a message from someone inside his firm, one of the partners I'd never even met, thanking me. That afternoon, a courier showed up at my apartment with a package. No note, just a box. Inside was the watch. My father's Hamilton. Newly repaired. A new band. Still ticking. There were photos, too. Ones I'd never seen. Him holding me as a baby. Laughing with my grandmother on their porch. A sealed envelope full of letters he wrote during his final weeks but never mailed. And a certificate. A donation to the Hospice Foundation in my father's name. $300,000. I made the call. The one that saved Dean's investment. Not for him, for me. I'd said I would, and I did. I wasn't going to become the kind of person they were. But the damage was already done. No one in their circle would forget. Their names were no longer associated with prestige. Now they were synonymous with betrayal. 2 days later, my mother's mother reached out. My maternal grandmother. I hadn't seen her since the day on the train. She said she'd received the confession email and was horrified. Said she had no idea what had really happened. That Lillian told her I was alive but wanted nothing to do with her side of the family. Another lie. We met for coffee. It was strange, like talking to a ghost from a life that never fully existed. But she cried. Said she wanted to be part of my life if I'd let her. I told her I'd think about it. The next morning, I drove past their house. For sale sign planted in the front yard. Rumors swirled. Dean was trying to get out clean. They were planning to move. Somewhere quieter. Somewhere no one knew them. They'd survive. Money makes survival easier. But the image they built, the story they told, it was gone. And me? I sat in my apartment, the watch ticking steadily on my wrist. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel healed. But I felt whole. For the first time, I wasn't the abandoned kid. I wasn't the ghost. I was real. And they couldn't erase me anymore. I thought that was the end of it. That after the emails, the confession, and the fallout, the story was over. They'd move away. I'd move on. The past would finally be behind me. But closure's a strange thing. It doesn't arrive quietly. Sometimes, it shows up months later, wearing a different face. It started with a letter. Handwritten. No return address. I almost threw it out, thinking it was junk. But when I opened it, the first line stopped me cold. You don't know me, but I know who you are. The letter was from someone named Ellie. She claimed to be Dean's niece, but that wasn't entirely true. She'd been raised by Dean's older sister, his half-sister, technically, and grew up around him, watched him build his business. Said she hadn't spoken to him in nearly a decade, but she still followed his public life. She wrote that she'd seen his name trending after the gala fallout, dug deeper, and found pieces of my story online. She said the version people were hearing didn't match the man she knew. At first, I thought it was another attempt to guilt me, that maybe Dean had sent her to appeal to me in some roundabout way. But then she wrote something else. I don't think you know the full story, she said. I'm not saying Dean's a saint. He's not. But you need to understand something. Your mother didn't just lie about you. She lied about everything. Attached were scans, records, financial documents. They traced back 5 years, maybe more. They weren't about Dean's business deals. They were about shell companies, fraudulent accounts, money being funneled into accounts under fake names. One of those names matched an alias Lillian had used years ago on a short-lived Etsy shop she once bragged about on social media. That stopped me cold. Ellie claimed that Dean had unknowingly signed off on a string of transactions. Lillian had created these accounts using her maiden name, combined with forged IDs. She'd used Dean's access to launder money. And when the investment I designed put pressure on their finances, it forced her entire structure to wobble. That's why she panicked. That's why she broke so fast. I spent a week digging. Quietly. I followed the paper trail she gave me. I didn't want it to be true, but every line added up. The offshore accounts. The buried transfers. Lillian hadn't just been lying to her friends. She'd been lying to Dean. Using him. Dean wasn't just the man who replaced my father. He was her mark. I didn't know what to do with that at first. Part of me wanted to let it go. I'd already dismantled their world. I'd exposed their lies. But something inside me felt unfinished. Not angry. Just clear. So I compiled everything. Neatly. No drama. I submitted it to a financial crimes tip line. Anonymous but detailed. I attached the documents Ellie sent me, plus my own research. Then I waited. 3 weeks later, it hit the news. A quiet investigation turned very loud. A joint inquiry between state auditors and federal investigators launched into a network of fraudulent charities and laundering schemes. The names weren't public at first, but I recognized the language. And then, the confirmation. Lillian's name was listed amongst several persons of interest. Dean's company froze his assets for internal review. His name was removed from upcoming real estate deals. Investors left in waves. Their house, already listed, sat untouched. Nobody wanted it. I didn't celebrate. There was nothing satisfying about it. No phone call. No final message. Just silence. Then, one night, Dean called. It was late. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. Rough. I didn't know, he said. I swear to God, I didn't know. That was all. I never responded. Lillian didn't try again. She disappeared from social media. Her old accounts wiped. No posts. No apologies. Just gone. It's been 5 months now. I've moved out of that apartment. Got a new job. Something quiet. Something mine. I still wear the watch. Still polish it every Sunday like my grandfather used to. Sometimes, I catch myself staring at it. Tick, tick, tick. Not to remember the pain, but to remember the patience. People ask me if it was worth it. The time, the planning, the years of silence, watching from a distance. And the answer's still yes. Because it wasn't just about revenge. It was about truth. About not letting someone else rewrite the story of who I was. About showing the world that I didn't vanish. I wasn't a lie. I didn't disappear on a train like a forgotten suitcase. I lived. I endured. And when the moment came, I didn't scream. I didn't threaten. I didn't burn down their house. I handed them the match. And they lit it themselves.